the phone now because I see a 727 area code, and I can tell you this much: there's a survey in December. Before I even get into the survey or some of my findings, I want to welcome Ms. Tammy Strickland. Tammy, how you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Tammy, I want to get into some of these facts because I tell you, when your portfolio crossed my desk, I said, you know what, I got to have you on because it just makes too much sense. And I just want to start off by saying a December 2014 survey of U.S. teens reported that use of cigarettes, alcohol, and drugs is on the decline, but marijuana use has plateaued and expected to increase. And I started to cringe because my daughter just turned 13, and she's in that, that teen phase, and she's about a year and a half out from being in high school, and I can remember the peer pressure because 36% of high school teens think occasional marijuana use is harmful, down from over 52% in 2009. I'm going to stop right there because I'm now concerned. I don't know what to do, and she's getting ready to head off to high school, and I'm like, okay, as a parent, what should we do? I mean, I want you to be able to introduce yourself, but I have so many questions that we have prepared to ask you. So I'll give you the floor.
Okay, well, I'm happy to answer any of your questions. I, too, am a parent of two children, and my son is almost 13, so I completely understand. Anytime you reduce the perception of harm of something and increase accessibility, you're going to have increased use. I mean, that's just a fact. So with, what we see happening across the United States with marijuana being legalized, both medically and recreationally, it sends a message that, oh, it's fine and it's not that bad and, it's not harmful. And if parents are doing it, adults are doing it, and they're saying, okay, well, why would children say no anymore? So that's the scary part. So the real important thing is to actually get the facts and educate your children on what these things are, because the marijuana today is not like the marijuana in the 60s and 70s. It's completely different. And
I got to jump in, Tammy, because we're going to talk about THC levels, and we're going to talk about all of that stuff tonight. We're going to get down to the bottom of this, but I want to hand it back over to you.
Sure. So I want to make sure I'm on point with what you want me to talk about. But when you just talk about that issue of marijuana plateauing and it's going to increase, and it's because of that. It's because of all of those factors. So the biggest thing and the most important thing that a parent can do is really be available, have open communication. I talk to so many parents and they say, well, just don't do that. And that's bad for you. But why? Why is it bad for you? Why should I not do it? When you look at the effects of marijuana, there's no way that anything that's going to get a person high is going to mix well with education, going to school, aspiring to higher personal achievement, better interaction with peers. So it does the opposite, actually. So that type of education and empowering children to be better and stronger and, more able and more capable is, I think, the most important thing to combat this increasing accessibility of this drug.
I guess you hit it dead on because with my daughter and with my son, I usually say, let's have an open and honest conversation. You're not going to get in trouble. Let's get down to what we're going to, what I'm trying to find out. I mean, I know that's something that has worked for me, but like I said, I'm concerned about the teenage years. So I guess we'll table some of these tips that you might have for later on, because my first question is, why is alcohol and drug use declining over the past year?
That is a good question, and I actually was surprised to see that. I do think with the issues we have with prescription pill epidemics and legalization of marijuana, there is more education happening nationwide on drugs and the effects of drugs. So clearly that's having an impact. And I'm pleased to see that, because I've said for many years that education is the key to this issue. But you know, sometimes you look in your environment where you are, and you think, well, that doesn't make sense to me. That study result doesn't prove out what I'm seeing in my local environment or my neighborhood, or, you know. So again, people have to remember it's a nationwide, you know, study, and I was happy to see it. I was also quite surprised. So I can only attribute it to the education that's actually happening on the subject of these drugs.
So Tammy, I mean, I know you're the executive director of Suncoast Rehabilitation Center. Is that in Clearwater, Florida? Is that where you're located?
No, it's actually in Hernando County, the Tampa Bay area, generally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got you.
But it's in Florida, yeah.
Okay, because I lived in, I would say about 12, 13 years ago, I lived in Valrico, Florida. I don't know if that rings a bell for you.
Yeah, I've heard the name. But,
okay.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I saw the 727 area code, and I said, okay. So tell me this, why is marijuana not declining in teens, and what can be done to prevent an increase?
Well, I would say that marijuana is not declining because of what I said, because the perception of harm of marijuana is decreasing. You know, people are pushing that, it can be used for medical use now, and, you know, it's being legalized, I mean, like wildfire across the nation. So, and not only for medical use, but for recreational use. And it really sends a very strong message that, well, it's no big deal. So that's concerning, and I think that's part of the reason. And the more that occurs, there will be an increase in use. There's just no doubt about that. So I think what can be done about it, again, is I've talked to so many parents that don't even understand what marijuana is and what it consists of and what scheduled drug it is. And, you know, it's a dangerous drug. It's not a minor, you know, people argue that it was, you know, it's a plant like, you know, made by God. Well, it's actually not true anymore. And so really understanding what it is and the effects of it, and being able to talk to your kids and allow them to communicate and ask questions openly where they won't be punished, or, you know, is the best way to combat drug use in your family and with children. And I do it with mine all the time.
So tell me, what are the long-term effects of marijuana use?
Well, you know, there are studies now that long-term effects include schizophrenia, you know, but lowered IQ, you know, I mean, the short-term effects alone are so problematic with, you know, the distorted perception of, you know, the here and now and your reality, loss of coordination, slowed reaction time, you know, problems thinking and remembering things, increased heart rate. So, like, all of these things, when you think about what that does to, you know, a young person in you know, a student of any age, really, how they can study and learn and exceed, you know, with that sort of physical manifestation going on, it's problematic. And the long-term effects are just, you know, generally sort of not, you know, less focus, less purpose, less drive. You know, I see it time and time again with clients in my treatment facility. And then there's some startling ones like, you know, mental, you know, schizophrenia and things like that, which is like really startling.
What are the alternatives to medical marijuana?
Well, you know, I'm a big believer in identifying the source of a problem and tackling the source. So, you know, drugs just cover up pain and they cover up symptoms. So I'm not going to argue that people who are terminally ill might benefit from it, or, but that's a very small percentage of people to have it legalized, across the country in every state, with regulations, with very lax regulations. I mean, we just fought the Amendment 2 in Florida, which was defeated, thank God. We have another fight coming up, but, because the regulations were so lax, like, the pot shops could be anywhere. They weren't required to be zoned. There was no age limit for people getting a medical marijuana card. So kids, you didn't need parental consent. So, that type of stuff it's just scary. And it leads to anyone from, someone having a headache or, foot pain or anything, being able to go and get marijuana instead of find the source of your problem and fix the source of it. If you're dying, I understand that's one issue, and there are people that I do believe could benefit from it, but not to justify this widespread legalization in my mind.
I have 3 questions that are parent related, but the first question I'm going to ask you is, what drug education programs and strategies are most effective?
Well, what drug education strategies? I mean, the
right. What drug?
Go ahead.
Okay.
I mean, I would say again, it's communication, but whether it's parents or whether it's me or whether it's a school giving a drug education lecture or seminar to the student body, or it has to be real, and it has to be, NIDA puts out these really great booklets on drugs that cover each drug, what they are, the effects. They're free. There are so many wonderful online resources to understand what drugs are these days, party drugs, and, and so understanding it first, and then being able to communicate it in a real fashion, so where there can be open communication and questions and real examples versus just, oh, it's bad, say no to drugs, say no to drugs. That just doesn't work. It's like a brush off to kids because they're smart, and they're like, well, why not? I see other people doing it. Right. Why can't I do it? So
right.
And there are studies, and time and again, drugs lead to harder drug use. I mean, not 100% of the time, but generally, 95, I would say, % of the clients in my treatment facility have marijuana and alcohol at the top of their drug list. So that's where it started, and then it just progressed into harder and harder drug use.
So, for us parents, what are signs of drug abuse that parents can look out for?
Well, if you have a child that's generally it becomes withdrawn or not as active, physically, or wanting to go out all the time instead of spending time at home, not open in communication the way they used to be, grades are declining, and then there are physical factors, just how do they look? Do they look healthy? Are they getting, sleep? All of those things. But it's really actually pretty obvious if you're aware of your children that something's wrong. And then it's just finding out what it is. It's not always drugs, but sometimes it is.
So as a parent, I want to open up that dialogue with my child for the first time. What are some best practices that you can offer?
I hit it pretty head on, and I think that's the best way to do it with kids, because it's amazing to me, just with my children, discovering what they talk about and what they already know from their friends. So I always reinforce, regardless of your friends, I'm your best friend, and I'm your mom and your best friend, and I will always have your best interest at heart, so you can talk to me about anything. And like you said at the beginning, you will never get in trouble if you tell me the truth. If you ask me a question, I will always be here for you. If you lie to me, we're going to have a problem. So let's just be open with each other, So I really sort of lay the playing field so it's like they really feel like they're safe and can communicate openly. And then I hit it head on. I mean, I started talking to my kids when they were quite young about, have you heard about drugs and do you know what they are? And then they can identify people on the street and go, that person looks drunk. I'm like, okay, good. So it's sort of that being able to differentiate between the positive and the negative and go, oh, I don't want to be like that. So my kids are so well informed, just because of who I am and what I do, that they know they're like, that's ridiculous. That's stupid. We will never do that, which is great. And then I try to encourage them to set a good example for, their friends and in whatever environment they may be in. Because a big problem kids have is the fear of sort of fitting in or being accepted or how to handle social situations. And so it's very easy to buckle to peer pressure unless they are built up enough on their own and at home to feel like they are a leader and they can kind of call the shots and set an example for someone else. So that's what I do.
So thank you. Tammy, I'm going to read a quote that I have here from you. Okay. It talks about today's marijuana has the highest THC levels ever seen. Marijuana sold in pot shops as medicine is testing at THC levels in the mid-20% range, which is much higher than marijuana sold on the street and dwarfs levels seen nearly 40 years ago when the average THC potency was 1.37%.
Mm-hmm.
Could you just elaborate? Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. So THC, people today actually grow and cultivate marijuana for the high THC levels. And THC is what gets you high. There's another element in marijuana which has the medicinal benefit, and it's not THC. So that's part of the argument we fight when states are trying to legalize marijuana. Well, why are you selling it with these high THC levels? Because the intent and the true purpose is to get high. So if you have marijuana, the other, well, let me go back. So basically, years ago, decades ago, the THC levels were very low, 1.5% THC, and it still had an effect and got you high. Now they are in the mid-20s and have hit 30%, and that's because you can actually, marijuana isn't just grown in a field. I mean, now it's grown in warehouses and basements, and you have lights to simulate the sun and fans to simulate the wind, and to simulate the outdoors, to have the growth that it's like genetically modified foods. It's the same concept. They're actually modified to grow these strong strains of high THC marijuana. So, and that's it. That's on purpose, so then the pot shops sell those and have all different kinds of names and strains of them, but the bottom line is they get you high. And do they maybe help you eat if you're terminally ill and have lost your appetite? Well, sure, but that's an after effect, So
gotcha.
The intent, though, is if you look at truly what's happening, the intent is to get people high, or the THC levels would be much lower, and they would be higher in the CBD, which is the element that has which has been found to have a medicinal benefit. And that does not get you high.
Tammy, tomorrow on latenightparents.com, we're going to release a blog from you that offers tips on how to talk to your kids and teens about drug use. I'm just going to run through the topics really quick because we're a little short on time, but I'm going to say start at an early age. Make sure your child knows that you're a safe person to come to for help. Have an honest dialogue. Remind them that even prescription drugs can be abused. Fully inform teens of the risk of involved in drug and alcohol use. If you are abusing drugs yourself, seek help. I think a lot of these topics that are going to be available on our blog tomorrow, we've covered tonight. I definitely want to thank you for joining us. Tell us best ways of getting in contact with the Suncoast Rehabilitation Center if someone is in need.
Well, yes, great. They can call 1-800-511-9403, day or night. And we have a website at www.suncoastrehabcenter.com, and we have online forms and counselors available. And I can be reached through that, website as well if anyone ever has any questions, because I'm highly motivated to help educate youth on drugs. So I'm always happy to help.
Tammy, I want to give you a one-time round of applause. I want to thank you once again for joining us. Tammy Strickland, Executive Director of the Suncoast Rehabilitation Center in Florida. And we want to definitely have you come back sometime in the future. So we want to thank you so much.